Christian nationalism has entered the conversation. Conservatives are embracing it, centrists are justifying it, and liberals are condemning it. Kind of. But few people have a clear definition of what Christian nationalism actually is, at least not an actionable definition. For the most part, it operates on a you know it when you see it definition. This lack of clarity allows Christian nationalism to thrive unopposed. You must know your enemy to fight it, so without truly knowing what Christian nationalism is, its opponents only issue weak rejections of the Christian nationalist ideology, and its proponents are running wild with a lack of opposition. Take the ELCA, for example, because it's my denomination and the one I understand with enough authority to critique. The ELCA has joined many mainline Protestant denominations in condemning Christian nationalism, but it has only condemned the ideology. The condemnation threatens no action against Christian nationalism. It establishes no boundary against Christian nationalist practice, and it prescribes no strategy against Christian nationalism for its members. The ELCA has merely said that Christian nationalism is bad and unwelcome. But because the ELCA has offered no concrete definition of Christian nationalism in practice, it is impossible to identify any Christian nationalism taking place inside or outside the denomination. Someone would have to shout about being a Christian nationalist in an ELCA congregation for the ELCA to identify actual Christian nationalism taking place. And even then, it is unclear what the ELCA would do about it. This is not a hypothetical situation. There are absolutely Christian nationalist congregations in the denomination who operate without discipline, while churches acting against Christian nationalism are monitored for being too political. Now, I am not an expert on Christian nationalism. I have read many books on the subject, but I have read enough to know that I am not an expert. I am about to give you a pragmatic definition of Christian nationalism. It is a definition I believe can be used to combat Christian nationalism, but I recommend that you read the books that are out there for yourselves. I will give a recommended reading list at the bottom of this article that I used to put these points together. And I encourage you to demand that your denomination or whatever organization you are a part of work with experts to establish a more concrete, pragmatic, actionable definition of Christian nationalism. But all right, here it is, my pragmatic definition of Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism is the belief in Christian supremacy. In America, it is the belief in American Christian supremacy. Therefore, Christian nationalism is any belief or action that promotes or permits American Christian supremacy in every or any part of life. American Christian supremacy, to be clear, claims that 1, Christians are superior, 2, Americans are superior, and 3, therefore American Christians should rule over the world. Christian nationalism, by this definition, is in control of the American government in every branch and chamber. That is not a matter of debate. They are telling us that they are there. And it is metastasizing into every political party in every country, of every state, of every county is what I meant to say. Christian nationalism is inextricably linked with white supremacy. It exists to justify white supremacy, likewise with patriarchy and heteronormativity. In America, they are all connected. If you would oppose one, you must oppose all of them. Is Christian nationalism a deformed version of Christianity, or is it what Christianity has always been? Yes. It also doesn't matter. Religions evolve. Modern Christian nationalism is the direct response to the evolution of other branches of Christianity in the past century, specifically since the Second World War. This means that all Christians are responsible for rejecting Christian nationalism because they exist because of us, or at the very least alongside us. But what can you do about Christian nationalism? We need greater political opposition to Christian nationalism. But what can we do to oppose Christian nationalism right now in ourselves and in our communities? Because it is by addressing the Christian nationalism close to us that we will collectively work toward a greater understanding and opposition of this disgusting ideology. And make no mistake, Christian nationalism needs to be outright rejected. Anything short of the outright rejection is insufficient for combating Christian nationalism. It cannot be reasoned with. Like all forms of fascism, and it is a form of fascism, it seeks to dominate every conversation and every place that it shows up. It cannot be condemned without clear consequences for Christian nationalist activity, behavior, and belief. It thrives on the tolerance of other Christians. It cannot be merely resisted. If it is not stopped, it will spread into every facet of life like a cancer. It needs to be rejected. And if you do not want Christian nationalism to have influence, much less dominance over American politics as it currently does, you need to reject it. But for the love of God, how? Organizations are struggling to provide a workable definition of Christian nationalism, and you cannot reject what you cannot clearly define. So for large organizations, namely Christian denominations, the task is clear: get educated, define Christian nationalism better than you currently have, with a workable definition that anyone can apply to their lives, and then get to work rejecting it at every level of your organization and then outside of your organization. But you, the individual, probably do not have enough time to read every book on Christian nationalism. You probably do not have enough influence over whatever organization you are a part of. And even if you do, we need to be rejecting it right now. Not after a long study period. It's already too late. And as a connoisseur of books on Christian nationalism, I can tell you that a lot of the recommendations for rejecting Christian nationalism are directed toward larger organizations, or they are systemic critiques. That's fine. It's just we need something a little more immediate. Academics tend to work at the meta level. I'm no exception. We tend to be better at diagnosing large-scale problems than we are at prescribing small-scale solutions. But each book on Christian nationalism does have a few good ideas for rejecting Christian nationalism at the individual level. I've combined these ideas with my own experience in congregations, and so I present you with 5 concrete practices that you can start doing to reject Christian nationalism now. Here they are. Here are the 5 ways Christians can oppose Christian nationalism. 1. Stop demonizing secularism. 2. Accept that it's okay for people not to attend your church. 3. Abolish hierarchies wherever you can. 4. Oppose Christendom. Prioritize interfaith accompaniment. And 5. Luke 4:18 verses 18 through 19 answers Micah 6 through 8. As the saying goes, these practices are simple, but not easy. Each comes with an explanation. I'll be as brief as possible, and I'll include a summary at the end of each section if you don't have the time to read through it all. One caveat: these practices are directed toward Christians or people in relationship with Christian churches. That's just because Christians are the ones best positioned to oppose Christian nationalism. That isn't to say that non-Christians don't have a role in the fight against Christian nationalism. In fact, they are already combating Christian nationalism by not being Christian, whereas Christians are lending passive support to Christian nationalism if they are not actively rejecting it. So if there's a demand or interest, I would be glad to explore a secular companion to these 5 practices. Speaking of, the first point is stop demonizing secularism. Secularism is the great boogeyman of Christian nationalism. It is often named as the great evil that threatens Christianity's place in America, regardless of whether you're in a more conservative or liberal church. Even if you don't think that secularism is evil, consider whether you perceive Christianity or secularism to be binary opposites. Do you consider Christians to be more moral than those who don't go to church? Do you perceive secularism to be missing something that Christianity possesses? Are there values of Christianity at odds with the values of secular society? These binary beliefs are all over the place in Christian churches of every denomination. And I mean every denomination. Playing into this binary makes it easier for one to slide into the framework of Christian nationalism. And to be fair, there are secular extremists out there, like the new atheists, for instance, who also operate in this binary. But recent years have revealed them as crypto-fascists, and Christianity still has disproportionate privilege in American life that secularism does not. So it is an uneven fight, even where it is a fight. The truth is that Americans have been secular for most of the country's history. It's really only in the mid-20th century that we saw a dramatic rise in religiosity and church attendance. There are some great awakenings and religious revivals in American history, but the standard really is a lot more secularism and a lot more moderate to even low church attendance. The recent decline in Christian membership is the result of socioeconomic factors, not a secular attack on the church. And in fact, current rates of church attendance are pretty consistent with the majority of American history, so it might just be that people are being more honest. Now, we do need to acknowledge the way that Christianity is uniquely privileged in America and has been from the beginning. The tax laws that apply to Christian churches allow for far too many bad faith actors. Courts apply the freedom of religion to allow Christian values and activities to hold dominion in public spaces and over private lives. A big reason that Christian nationalism demonizes secularism is because a country that actually followed the First Amendment would deprivilege Christianity, and that would hurt Christian nationalist churches the most. So the only secular agenda that exists is one that tries to make Christian nationalists follow the law. A little side note here. You may have heard about how large Christian nationalist megachurches are. They love to talk about how impressive and successful they've become, and they point to growing membership for their success. But that's because Christian nationalist churches exploit tax laws to adopt rapid growth strategies that make pastors rich and leave congregants in the dust. It's like corporations who flaunt tax laws and safety regulations and then brag about their productivity. They are being funded by bad laws and lack of enforcement of good laws. Put simply, current American legal practice incentivizes Christian nationalist megachurch culture. I am not smart enough to identify how to fix tax laws related to Christian churches. I am only aware of how much it privileges Christianity, and for now, it's enough to know that a lot of opposition to secularism or other religions, wait for point 4, is rooted in the fear of Christian privilege being stripped away. So here's the more succinct version of all of these points. If you want to oppose Christian nationalism, deprivilege Christianity in American law and society. Recognize that secularism is good and normal in a multicultural democracy. Advocate for this point in local and national politics and start agitating your local school board now to get Christianity out of public schools. That means no prayer at sports events, limited celebration of Christmas, embrace of all religious celebrations is another option, and choosing educational content that does not lift up supposed Judeo-Christian values. If you don't think that's happening in your schools, then you're wrong. Christianity is already being prioritized everywhere in American education and social life. You need to start opposing it. If you don't, Christian nationalist pressure will win. Also, make sure that your church stops demonizing secularism. It's not a good thing to be doing. If you hear your pastor critiquing secularism over and over again, that's a red flag. Try to get them to stop. If they don't, I won't tell you what to do, but you might want to consider doing something. Advocating for greater secularism will actually help liberal or Christian churches who are struggling, because deprivileging Christianity in American life will remove the incentive for megachurch models of ministry. So really, if you want your neighborhood church back, remove the reason that megachurches exist. Help make American society secular, not more Christian. So, in sum, this point means that secularism is not evil, so stop treating it like it is. It also means that Christianity is privileged in American society, so to oppose Christian nationalism, we need to work to deprivilege Christianity. It also means that we need to deconstruct the binaries that we hold between Christianity and secular society. If you're in a church, you probably either hold these binaries or you are around people who do. Now we get to point number 2. Accept that it's okay for people not to attend your church. One of the most common laments I hear from well-meaning Christians is that they wish that non-religious people knew about their church, or people who have been hurt by the church knew about their church that does it right. It's a noble thought, but it's rooted in an American Christian supremacist belief that people need to attend a church to be good, healthy, well-rounded individuals or citizens. The evidence just does not support this belief. Many different religious and non-religious spaces offer people paths to a holistic and healthy life. That's why they are attending those spaces and not a church. This doesn't mean that there aren't other good reasons to attend a church, but it does mean that there are no pragmatic reasons that people need to attend a church. If you want them to try out your church community, then go ahead and invite them, but recognize that you probably need them more than they need you. Your good church does not need to be the answer to their experience with a bad church. Because this belief that people need to attend a church is a Christian nationalist line of thinking that emerged in the 1950s. It rose in response to anxieties over communism and integration. It is not an inherent Christian belief. For the majority of history, plenty of Christians have been perfectly fine interacting in multi-religious societies. Anyone who tells you otherwise is trying to sell you on a Christian nationalist version of history. Church attendance for the sake of conformity is a Christian nationalist strategy. As proof of this strategy, look at how many right-wing politicians have begun making a lot more Christian overtures in the past 5 years. Trump talking about getting to heaven is not just him rambling. That is a way that he is framing himself as a Christian president, specifically a Christian nationalist president to his followers. A lot of people have been too traumatized by the concept of church to ever attend one again, and a lot more will be terribly traumatized by this modern wave of Christian nationalism. That says nothing about your church, because this isn't about your church. Find a way to love and support people who have been hurt by the church as they take care of themselves. Get rid of the idea that the only way to support someone is when they come to you, go to them. The reality is that a lot of well-intentioned churches are going to decline in membership and may likely die, or close rather. Die is very extreme. And that's fine, because what Christians opposed to Christian nationalism actually need to ask is how many Christian churches do we need? Why do we need to ask this question? 2 main reasons. First, because the existence of Christian churches in America is tied to colonization. Christianity did not naturally emerge from this land. It is an invasive species. That doesn't mean that it can't learn to cohabitate, but it is nowhere close to cohabitation with this land and its people. The desperation to keep churches alive is inextricable from the desire to keep American colonialism and Christian dominion alive. Consider what would happen if Christian churches actually followed the example of Jesus and gave their church property to the indigenous people of their area. Instead of doing land acknowledgements, we do a mass land return. That's impossible to imagine, right? Does that make you nervous about where you'd go to find a church? Good, because that's how it should feel to redistribute power equitably, given how much harm Christianity has done to Turtle Island and its inhabitants. Also, as I've been writing this article, news reports have come out of churches doing exactly this. Now, the second reason we need to ask how many churches we really need is because the prevalence of Christian churches is rooted in models of capitalist competition and private ownership that are incompatible with the gospel. Does every town and city need a church building for each Protestant denomination? Does every town and city need 4 to 10 churches for the same denomination? If so, I'd love to hear the reasons, because the only reasons I've encountered so far are all based in selfishness and control, and those are white supremacist motivations. They do not serve a church working toward harmony and justice. Christian nationalism relies upon you believing in Eisenhower's statement that I don't care what church people attend as long as they go to church. He didn't actually say that, of course, but I've heard a lot of people in churches quote him as saying that. Because church is not the solution to everybody's problem. That's not even why churches were created in the first place. But if you believe and persist in believing that it's better for people to be any kind of Christian than not to be Christian at all, or that they need to be Christian in your way, then you will continue to lend passive support to Christian nationalism. You continue to give support to the idea that people need to be Christian. And if you believe that your church is an antidote to Christian nationalism, then you will start to find yourself in unfortunate symbiosis with Christian nationalism. Because the cycle of people leaving their mainline church, going to a mega church, and then either them or their kids get burned out by that mega church, and then eventually they go find a mainline church that promises the opposite, and the cycle continues all over again. That's been the cycle of American Christianity for the last 70-ish years. People leaving Christianity are trying to break that cycle. Maybe they're right. So, in summary, your church is not the antidote to Christian nationalism. Let go of the belief that everyone needs to go to a church. So instead of asking how you can get more people to join your church, ask how many churches are needed. This is hard. This is the work of vulnerability. This is recognizing that church does not exist to solve a problem. It exists to serve people. Serve the people by refusing to make this about your church or even you being the savior. Then just go out and support the people. That compassion is actually going to be what allows us to oppose Christian nationalism. I got a little preachy there. Sorry, it happens. Let's get to point number 3. Abolish hierarchies wherever you can. Christian nationalism, as I've said before, is inextricably linked to white supremacy, capitalism, patriarchy, militarism, heteronormativity, childism, the belief that children must be subordinate to adults, and every other form of hierarchy. It is part of the unholy union of hierarchies that all exist to uphold the power of the most powerful, abusive, and oppressive. The good news is that opposing Christian nationalism is as easy as opposing all other forms of prejudice. The bad news is that it is as difficult as opposing all other forms of prejudice. An easy first step is opposing any hierarchy you encounter. There are no good hierarchies in Christianity. This is not a social justice claim. It is the heart of Trinitarian Christianity. The Trinity abolishes any hierarchy that would separate God from God's creation. Any hierarchies that persist in Christianity exist to make you perpetuate and tolerate the hierarchies that fuel Christian nationalism and its compatriot prejudices, especially the hierarchies that seem innocuous. And I mean that. Anyone who gets to exert power over another is in the place of sin. That includes me as a pastor and a parent. And yes, sometimes leaders need to be appointed to get stuff done. I'm not opposed to expertise or delegation, but I am opposed to power being concentrated in the hands of one person or one group of people, especially if there is not a clear and functioning check on their power over others, and especially if people in power feel entitled to hold power over others. The reality is, Christian churches of all denominations are built upon these hierarchies. Pastors and councils have hierarchical power over congregations. Pastors themselves are subject to the hierarchy of bishops, call processes, and the various ways that they are hired to serve a church. But the church itself is subject to the monetary hierarchy of wealth and budgets. Within churches, children are subject to the hierarchy of elders. Newcomers are subject to the hierarchy of long-term members. All of these hierarchies are wrong, but they are present in both Christian nationalist churches and normal churches. Even the best churches have these hierarchies. I have never encountered a church free from hierarchies. And the hierarchies we learn to tolerate in church guide us to tolerate the hierarchies we encounter in families, work, and government. When the true Christian message is that we are all equals with equal power over and under each other. Any system that breaks that full equality is sinful, and it always leads to abuse. This leads us to either perpetuate Christian nationalism in our own churches or in our own communities or in our own families, or it leads us to tolerate it when we encounter it out in the world. It's good that some of us find the Christian nationalism happening in American politics right now so disgusting. But the reality is we should be more than disgusted. It should be abhorrent to us. But the hierarchies of Christian nationalism are so commonplace in so many expressions of Christianity that we are not nearly as disgusted by it as we should be. Need ideas for where to look for these hierarchies? Check how much power your pastor has in your church. If you have more than one, is there a lead or executive pastor? How do they exert that authority? Who do they answer to? Are there immediate, accessible, and well-known ways to check their power? Then try this thought exercise. If you wanted to organize a congregational protest outside an ICE detention facility, whose approval would you need? Who could stop your efforts? How could you appeal that opposition? If you could be stopped at any point, or if it's just ambiguous, then you do not have full equality in your church. I'm not saying that boundaries should be abolished entirely. It's good to have rules and guidelines and people responsible for making sure that those guidelines and boundaries are followed. But we need to learn to practice boundaries without hierarchies if we are going to oppose Christian nationalism, because Christian nationalism is all about hierarchies. A good rule of thumb is that the boundaries of a church community need to be simple enough for an elementary schooler to navigate. Anything more is too complex. This elementary schooler should have the same power as a church elder. If you still need more ideas for where to look for hierarchies, consider these questions. Who is in charge of kids? Who gets to make decisions about church property and who doesn't? Who gets to make decisions about who gets to use the church? Who can people go to for restorative justice if they are harmed by the church? If you start asking these questions, you will discover the role of hierarchies in your church. We will not be able to dismantle Christian nationalism until we dismantle our own reliance on hierarchies. In sum, for this point, first, we need to identify and name the hierarchies in your community or in your home. 2, dismantle any hierarchies you see. This will take a long time. Use therapy wisely. 3, turn this practice outwards to forms of social prejudice. Make dismantling hierarchies the central focus of your church or community. 4, oppose Christendom, prioritize interfaith accompaniment. I'm going to take a drink for a second. America. Okay, let's say point 4 again. Oppose Christendom, prioritize interfaith accompaniment. Christian nationalists are not your friends. I'm going to say that again. Christian nationalists are not your friends. They will not become your friends. If they are still in relationship with your church or you, it is only because they are getting something from you. You will not change them. You will not persuade them. Continuing to be in relationship with Christian nationalists only teaches them that you will tolerate their beliefs and practices. They are counting on your tolerance to do terrible things to vulnerable people. Take your tolerance away from them and give your tolerance to people who desperately need it. Remember the definition of Christian nationalism that's actionable. It is the belief in American Christian supremacy, that American Christians should be able to be prioritized, privileged, and basically rule over the country and also kind of the wider world. If you are in a relationship with someone who believes that, that is not an equal relationship. It never has been. I hate to break it to you. It might be painful, but they believed in something that is incompatible with equality. Andrew Whitehead and Samuel J. Perry present 4 relationships to Christian nationalism in their book, Taking America Back for God. These identifications are based on surveys and attitudes toward Christian nationalism in American politics. On the actual article, I will have the questions listed out there, but I'll also read them for you now, but just saying that if you want the visual, it's out there. But here are the 4 relationships that they define towards Christian nationalism. 1, the rejecter, who outright rejects Christian nationalism as a valid religious or political ideology. 2 is the resistor, who disapproves of Christian nationalism but is willing to tolerate its presence. 3 is the accommodator, who works to create spaces for Christian nationalism in religion and politics. 4 is the ambassador, who embraces Christian nationalism as the valid religious and political ideology. Here's their survey. It consists of a few different questions that are all ranked on a strongly agree, agree, disagree, and strongly disagree spectrum. The federal government should declare the United States a Christian nation. The federal government should advocate Christian values. The federal government should enforce strict separation of church and state. The federal government should allow the display of religious symbols in public spaces. The success of the United States is part of God's plan. The federal government should allow prayer in public schools. These last 2 questions are a little different. In the past, some people have characterized America as a Christian nation. Would you characterize America as a Christian nation today? Yes or no? Would you say that that's a good thing or a bad thing? You can rank that on a 1 to 5 scale of extremely good to not a very good thing at all. The scoring system, I'm not going to try to explain right here. You're going to have to go and look for that. But essentially, for everything you strongly agree with, that gives you a lot more points towards being an ambassador for Christian nationalism, while strongly disagreeing makes you more of a rejecter, except for question number 3, which is intended to be a switch around. Here's the important thing, though. To oppose Christian nationalism, you must be a rejecter. Resistance is not enough anymore, and you cannot delude yourself into thinking that you are a rejecter when you are only a resistor. A good litmus test is setting a boundary with all forms and expressions of Christian nationalism, because ecumenism is well and good, but only with boundaries. Christians aren't entitled to a relationship with you or your church, especially if they are not acting Christian. The strategy of Christian nationalist churches has been to build ecumenical relationships with the express purpose to lure members away from their congregations and to their own. It has never been a symbiotic relationship. It has always been a parasitical relationship. It has been the tactic of Billy Graham, YouthWorks, Group Publishing, Campus Crusade, and so many more. They will claim to be open to a relationship with all denominations of Christianity, but it is to lure your members to their programs and their churches, because they care about domination, not equal collaboration. You will not change Christian nationalist organizations and churches through relationship because they do not want to be changed. If you stay in relationship with Christian nationalists to change them, you will fail. You will be in that relationship for differing purposes. And when they learn your purpose, they will break off the relationship and take whoever they can from your congregation with them. Any relationship with Christian nationalists is inherently abusive because they are interested in power, not cooperation. The moment that they are not in power over you, they will leave. As a queer person in the church, I guarantee that. Christian nationalism believes in Christian dominance. It asserts that a majority of Americans, preferably all, should be Christian, because only Christians can be good American citizens. And to get more specific, only white, straight, able-bodied Christians can be good American citizens. But here's the real kicker. The worst thing you can be to a Christian nationalist is a Christian who rejects Christian nationalism. That's right. The people Christian nationalists hate the most are other Christians. They consider Christians who reject Christian nationalism to be heretics. To the Christian nationalist movement, these Christians are people who should be allies who have spat in their face. They are bad PR. The existence of Christians who are not Christian nationalists threatens their claim to Christendom. This is why they attack LGBTQI plus Christians, women in ministry, progressive black leaders in Christianity. They hate that a clear alternative to their Christendom exists. Because true Christianity does not care about how many Christians there are. It cares about whether Christ's message is being lived out in the world. The whole book of Luke and Acts is about how that can be done by people living outside the faith. Every gospel portrays the early Christ movement being transformed by non-normative people. The existence of Christians operating outside of Christian nationalism contradicts their claim to define Christianity and Christendom. What I'm trying to convey is that if you are interested in rejecting Christian nationalism, then you are already the worst possible person you can be to a Christian nationalist. So if you are still in relationship with Christian nationalism, or Christian nationalists, it is only because you haven't rejected Christian nationalism directly enough, or because they think they can still get something from you. If you don't believe me, in front of them, these Christian nationalists that you are in relationship with, try condemning the Trump administration's holy war in Iran as a heretical and unchristian action. Express your belief that all Christians should accept queer people and ordain people of all genders. Proclaim your willingness to cooperate with people of any religion and see what happens. Another complaint I hear from well-meaning Christians is how Christian nationalists have stolen the title of Christian. That they garner all the media attention so that they are who people think of when they think of Christians. This did not happen by accident. It was a deliberate strategy of the Christian right that began in the 1980s and has now reached its zenith. Their strategy employed two main tactics: drama and a unified front. First, they used large, public, and melodramatic actions and statements to attract media attention to their cause. Anti-abortion and anti-queer activism were big approaches for 40 years. They would create the news to get their views covered. Even if the attention was negative at first, they gave permission for other Christian nationalists to take action. And eventually, their movement became associated with power. And when they became associated with power, they got the right to define the public perception of Christianity. And now they repealed Roe v. Wade, and they're saying that women shouldn't be allowed to vote. Second, they employed a unified front. Whenever a Christian nationalist group would demonstrate against queer people, they would be promoted by other Christian nationalist leaders and congregations. Their support for one another was active and not passive. They cross-promoted. So even if the average Christian was turned off by Christian nationalism at first, they would hear those actions being promoted by their pastors and communities, and it would open them up to the tenets and practices of Christian nationalism. So if you would oppose Christian nationalism, you will need to use these tactics to retake Christianity from Christian nationalism. That means performing dramatic actions that attract media attention and commit to a unified front. Your support for queer people, BIPOC folks, women in ministry, people of other faiths, and people of no faith needs to be aggressive, active, public, and unified. People of non-Christian faiths need your support and allegiance, for instance. Christian nationalists absolutely do not. So if you would oppose Christian nationalism, take all the energy you are giving to Christian nationalists and use it to build interfaith alliances. They need your accompaniment, and that accompaniment needs to be impossible to ignore, and it needs to have your whole denomination united behind it as much as possible. So what does this look like? Here's a quick guide. This is aimed at interfaith work, but it can easily apply to opening your community up to various forms of diversity. First, be in relationship with people of other faiths. Make sure your clergy and congregation is meeting with people of other faith or, other religions. Hopefully there's an interfaith alliance that already meets in your community. If there's not, create one, but make sure to create one with and not for people of non-Christian faiths. 2, learn what other religious communities need from these relationships. And then in the meantime, get ready to deliver. The support might be advocacy, financial, biopower, organization, transformation, who knows. 3rd, make sure that your whole church community gets on board with this relationship. It doesn't work if it's a small part of your community. You will need buy-in from your whole community. People of other faiths will not trust you or your community without a unified commitment. It's great for you to be in relationship with people of non-Christian faiths, but they don't just need your support right now, they need a whole community's support. 4, prepare for the big transformation. All Christian churches benefit from so much privilege in America that there will be a power imbalance in any interfaith relationship at the beginning. For a mutual relationship to exist, your community will need to give up the power and privilege that set it apart. This will be really hard. A big example of this practice is land back actions. Acts of dramatic solidarity are another one. Then 5th, expand this practice to as many non-Christian faiths as you can. Because we are looking for full solidarity with non-Christian faiths, Christian nationalism receives implicit solidarity from other Christians. The only way to combat this implicit solidarity is through explicit solidarity with communities that Christian nationalism rejects. That includes people of no faith. Christian nationalism thrives on the belief that the majority of Americans are Christian, and therefore all Americans should be forced to live by Christian values. The best way to deflate the buoyancy they get from this assumption is taking away their Christian credibility. The more Christians who reject Christian nationalism and Christian nationalists as a valid form of Christianity, the more they lose their ability to act on behalf of all Christians. The only way to oppose the implicit allegiance Christian nationalism gets from your identification as Christian is to explicitly reject Christian nationalism. It's not enough to do it in name. You must reject Christian nationalists and their actions. That means people, communities, figureheads, beliefs, and practices. You don't need to deal in hate to do this. Use the power of pro-social shame. Use the power of boundaries. Make people realize that choosing Christian nationalism means losing you in their lives. Make people who are ambivalent to Christian nationalism realize that maintaining this ambivalence means losing you. This will hurt, but the alternative is living under Christian nationalist control. Remember that you are not breaking the relationship. Those who have chosen Christian nationalism have already chosen to break off their relationship with you if you deviate from their expectations of you. The relationship is already conditional. It is already based on a power imbalance. You are simply taking the power back and giving that power to those who need it. Christian nationalism thrives as you tolerate its terror. Stop tolerating it. Now is the time to break the relationship with Christian nationalism and Christian nationalists. In summary, stop being in relationship with Christian nationalists, people, organization, and churches. This applies to families, friends, churches, ecumenical partnerships, and beyond. 2, to redefine Christianity away from Christian nationalists, your community needs to perform dramatic, public, and unified acts of interfaith accompaniment, both because that is the most offensive thing to Christian nationalism and because it is what will get you noticed by the media to start redefining Christianity away from Christian nationalism. 3rd, take the energy you are giving to stay in relationship with Christian nationalists and give it to interfaith partnerships. Show Christian nationalists who your allies are and then act like it. We need a breath after that one. Point number 5. Luke 4, verses 18 through 19 answers Micah 6 through 8. Micah 6:8. Micah 6:8 is a lovely verse, but it is also too vague to combat Christian nationalism. Christian nationalists also believe that they do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. So if you plan to oppose Christian nationalism, you must show how your faith leads you to practice the antithesis of Christian nationalism. I propose Luke 4, 18 through 19, where Jesus quotes Isaiah 61, verses 1 through 2, to announce the fulfillment of the promise of Jubilee. That promise is solidarity with the oppressed, liberty to captives, universal debt relief, comfort for all who grieve, and joining God's vengeance on oppressive powers. Christian nationalism despises all of these points. It rejects solidarity with the marginalized. It trusts in prisons, enforces debts, avoids grief, and enshrines oppressive power. Your faith must lead you to oppose each of these points in your words and actions. Only then will your faith show an integrity that can reject Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism relies upon people not really practicing the message of Christianity. It is our responsibility to put Christ's teachings and priorities into practice. Jesus came for liberation in the here and now. Christian nationalism wants you to believe that heaven is all that matters. Jesus showed solidarity with the oppressed and the weak. Christian nationalism wants you to believe that Jesus prioritized the powerful. Jesus died because his love, even vengeful love, was for the least of these. Christian nationalism wants you to ignore how they are crucifying so many people named Jesus, along with millions of others who bear the image of God. We are in a battle for the integrity of Christianity, and right now we are losing because we allowed Christian nationalism to gain too strong of a foothold in Christianity. But their foundation rests on our continued tolerance of their terror. If enough Christians reject Christian nationalism in both name and practice, their strength will crumble. What I'm trying to say is that Christian nationalism is not as strong as it wants us to believe. They chose rapid growth through churches that are get-rich-quick schemes. They built a theology by saying whatever they liked, not on a history of conversations and arguments. And they are only called Christians because other Christians didn't oppose such a naming. If there were a concerted, concentrated Christian liberation effort, their power would fall apart fast because they would be revealed for the religious frauds they are. Christian nationalism wants Christianity to be easy and for its integrity to be proven by American citizenship, white skin, and obedience. This is a tempting promise for people looking for simplicity, belonging, security, or a church that will justify all their belief in racism, hierarchy, and other prejudice. It is a false promise. Christian nationalism is opposed to Christianity. Rejecting Christian nationalism argues that Christianity is hard, painful, filled with failure. Its integrity can only be proven by the faith that is trust in the God who is love. It claims that liberation comes from trust in sacrifice, not in power. This is an unappealing promise to many people. The one benefit is that it is a real promise. So gird yourself. Being opposed to Christian nationalism means actually being Christian and acting like it. And as Jesus said, that ain't easy. In sum of this point, your definitions of justice, mercy, and humility must be concrete, not vague, to oppose Christian nationalism. Remember that Christian nationalists think that they are following the Bible too. Your definition of the Bible needs to be opposed to what they are doing, and your practices need to be opposed to what they are doing. Hold your pastors and preachers to that same standard. 2, liberation Christianity is the antidote to American Christian supremacy, but it requires bold action. You can't just say the liberation talking points, you gotta do it. Start by abolishing prisons. And 3, being opposed to Christian nationalism requires American Christians to operate with integrity. This will be very hard and quite the adjustment for the current Christian status quo. Let's have a conclusion here. There's a lot more to be said about Christian nationalism, but we need to be acting against Christian nationalism now and not later. I am sure there are things that I got wrong, things that I missed, or things that I didn't sufficiently support. But I also believe that these 5 practices are unimpeachable ways of rejecting Christian nationalism that anyone can begin performing today. As a reminder, here they are again in the short version. Stop demonizing secularism. Accept that it's okay for people not to attend your church. Abolish hierarchies wherever you can, oppose Christendom, prioritize interfaith accompaniments, and Luke 4:18-19 answers Micah 6:8. In many ways, I think that these actions are all something compassionate Christians have known that we need to do for a while now. We have known in the depths of our hearts or in the backs of our heads that the privileging of Christianity in America has kept us from needing to practice the call of Christ in earnest. We've been putting it off because it is really scary, terrifying even. Every year, we remember how the call of Christ leads to the cross. But to do nothing in response to Christian nationalism's rise would be impossibly selfish. This ideology is fueling genocide, apathy, and every form of death. It has warped the theology of the cross into the worship of state violence, execution, and oppression. Whatever connection Christian nationalism had to Christianity has been sacrificed on the altar of Iranian, Palestinian, Jewish, and indigenous children of God. It is time for all of us to do everything we can to reject Christian nationalism, not for the sake of Christianity, but for the sake of the world. Thanks for listening. The reading list that I recommend can be found on the original blog post. Take care, y'all.
Lifting up all the broken-hearted people, even me. Oh, our Lord and our God. You are heaven's bread to feed a hungry soul who wanders in the desert, longing to be made whole. You are living water pressed upon the lid of the woman who will never, never thirst again. Oh, searching for sheep as we wander out to find a greener pasture which to eat. You are the woman who turns out house and home, looking for